if you care about small business federal contracting, you have to care about the rule of two. The rule of two, SDA said, is the cornerstone of small business federal contracting. And if you remember from the FAR overhaul period last year, it was in doubt about whether the government would continue providing preferences to small businesses under the rule of two. Today on GovCon Intelligence, we have the person most responsible for getting the rule of two into the FAR overhaul and pushing it through the halls of Congress. Lizzie Sullivan is the president of Madison Services Group. That's a government relations firm in Washington that has clients across the acquisition ecosystem. Lizzie, thanks so much for joining us on GovCon Intelligence.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam. It's great to be here. Great to see you again.
Great to see you as well. So, rule of two, I spent a lot of time at SEA on the rule of two, pushing it through GAO cases and working with the FAR staff potentially to expand it. You have been the person most visible and involved on the rule of two now for years. Tell us a bit about what your motivation has been for pushing so hard on the rule of two, and where is it now on a statutory perspective? Why do you think we need a statute?
That's a great question. And I'm just going to start by saying anything I say, we work completely bipartisanly. We work with whoever wants to get what's best for this community done within reason, right? No crazies. So just, I would encourage anyone listening to not interpret my words and try and fit them into one box or the other. I'm an equal opportunity lover and hater of both political parties. But I think that this issue is something that has brought everyone together because it really is, like you said, the cornerstone of small business contracting. So just some history, and thank you for the nice introduction. Back, I believe it was last summer, before there was an executive order and the official kickoff to the FAR overhaul, there were rumblings that the FAR overhaul was happening in the basement of GSA. And based on some knowledge of...
I've been on that basement, by the way.
There you go. And, based on kind of who was at the table that we were being told, we thought it was extremely important to get in front of anything that was going to happen by cementing that Congress was watching and that the rule of two was important. So it was not just me. It was also Kate Benedetti, who works for the ranking member Nydia Velazquez from New York, who is sadly retiring, but has been such an advocate for all of these programs and really knows contracting in and out. And as does Kate, right? She's really one of the most savvy procurement staffers on the L. And she said, okay, let's introduce this bill. It's not perfect. They haven't even started, but yes, it sends this message. So that is how the bill came to be. And lo and behold, after that was dropped, there was executive order, an official, here's how the FAR overhaul is going to go. So really that message was well received. Well, not well received maybe, but received by the decision makers. The bill had, the original bill, which is HR 2804, has the addition of task and delivery orders to it. The reason it does is because we were mimicking that agreement that you put together, right, with the FAR Council on solving the Tolliver issue. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that case. I think it would be helpful.
Sure. The rule of two, for context, is the rule that says if you have two or more small businesses that can perform a requirement, the requirement must be set aside for small businesses. And the Tolliver case, which was a 2020 case from Court of Federal Claims, asked, is a requirement only a contract, which means for a multiple award IDIQ contract, just the base level contract, or could it apply to an order that AUC might issue of the contract? In that case, Judge Solemson, he's now Chief Judge of Court of Federal Claims, ruled that when an agency issues an order off a multiple award IDIQ contract, it needs to apply the rule of two prior to issuing that order. So what that means is an agency cannot go straight to a large business off of a multiple award IDIQ contract before it looks at small business competition. The reason that SBA and other agencies that come to this agreement about rule of two for orders is that we saw that more of federal contracting was going through orders, and we looked at that as a possible workaround on the rule of two. There were some statistics in there. We said if we were able to pass the rule of two for orders, that would add somewhere around $6 billion to small business
Wow.
contracting.
That's a lot. And it makes sense with the trends, right? But as it's been pointed out and how Congress has been moving the bill, there had to be some changes made, right? So there is a Senate companion bill, and I have my cheat sheet, S2656. That was introduced bipartisanly by the ranking member, Ed Markey of the Senate Small Business Committee, so the top Democrat, Cory Booker as the other Democrat, and then both Alaska Republican senators, Murkowski and Sullivan, were original co-sponsors. In our world, the reason that's important is because while you can add other people on to a bill, for example, the House bill, you can add on other sponsors. It sends a very important message when it is original co-sponsors on this bill. So that's kind of how we got started. The Senate came after the House. Flash forward to now, there was a markup in the House Small Business Committee, and this bill passed unanimously.
Wow.
However, worth noting, there was an amendment to the bill, and the amendment took out the task and delivery orders. And what it did is it mimicked exactly what the FAR overcall expanded the rule of two in their language, right? So it's anything above the SAT, right, applies to small business. They had to do that in order to get the bill moving forward because there was heartburn, I think, about doing something above and beyond what the administration had done. And that rule that unfortunately you worked on for a long time got rescinded. So it would have looked like they were superseding what the administration had done. So what the Democrats decided with the Republicans, and like this is how the legislative process works, is how can we negotiate, come to the table, and get to a place where we can move this forward? Because both of them, in this highly political and polarizing environment, still recognize the absolute importance and crucialness of the rule of two. And I think that's a really powerful message, honestly. Again, I know Washington, that I feel like people think it's just functional. Small business contracting legislation is something that we're able to work on because it brings both sides of the aisle together.
Now, congratulations on that really big win for small businesses. Is there any insight you can give us into what the lawmakers were agreeing on when they passed that unanimously? What areas did they feel were important to make such a big statement there?
Yeah, they felt that as the cornerstone of small business contracting, it needed to move forward. And we're really happy, and we were very happy with the expansion in the FAR overall, right, that we worked on. One of the things that's cropped up, and it just to go back to, your I'm just a bill, Schoolhouse Rock, it passed the committee. So now there are a couple options here. So it can go on the House floor. Oftentimes, those small business bills go through something called suspension votes, where 2/3 are required in the House to agree with for it to move forward. Another vehicle that gets talked about all the time is the National Defense Authorization Act.
Okay.
And that is Congress's last must-pass bill. So you can imagine every lobbyist in town, including us, try and get things onto that bill. That was actually something that some people cooked up about 10 years ago and said, well, small business applies to the industrial base, so it's germane, or it would make sense to put in the bill that authorizes the Department of Defense or Department for, right?
Some people, Nick Sullivan as well.
Is Sullivan and Murphy, and yes, exactly. And that has then kind of been the way that we've been able to move forward legislation. That's important because if you go back to the original process, then the Senate would need to mark it up and it need to go to the floor. And the Senate is much harder to move things through because a lot of the rules around timing, what they're working on, any one senator can put a hold on bill and say, no, this isn't moving forward. So right now we're working to get it in the House NDAA and also the Senate NDAA so that when both sides pass their bills and are conferencing, that it's very crystal clear that this needs to be in the final, what they call conference report, which is the final bill, and signed into law.
So we're talking about the 2027 NDAA
Yes.
possibility?
I'm like, everything is one state.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And do you see this getting in there and becoming the law for good?
We had 30, I think we're now at 39 organizations that represent then tens of thousands of small business contractors. Think about 500 individual companies that signed on to a letter for the original House bill before it was amended, right? And look, we have only so much control. As I mentioned, the House decided to make that amendment to move it forward. We would have loved the expanded bill, but again, we're happy with this version, right, to move forward. And so I thought that was a very powerful number of companies and boards to put together in like 72 hours, right, as this was about to get marked up. It's come to light that there is some concern from the AbilityOne community around the impact of Rule of Two, OSDBU, and mandatory sources. You're an attorney, I am not. So you could if you could talk about that. I didn't think that this was a problem, but this has been an effort to stop the bill. And I know that the committees are trying to work with the AbilityOne teams and their lobbying firms to figure out how to move forward here.
As a historical note, the Rule of Two has been around since 1962.
Wow.
And it's always been secondary to the mandatory sources, AbilityOne and which is GWAC and the Federal Prison Industries. So just historically, people understand the Rule of Two as going after an agency would apply mandatory sources. There was a question that came up with the VA specific Rule of Two. That's the one that applied in the Kingware Supreme Court case, where that was written in statute in a particular way, where the courts found that, in fact, that Rule of Two jumped ahead of the mandatory sources. There's other semi rules of two or suggestions of two in different programs that specify that they're subject to AbilityOne and Federal Prison Industries. This VA statute did not have that. So the court said the VA Rule of Two moves ahead of GWAC and Federal Prison Industries. Congress had to go back and change that. So Congress has solved that problem with the VA after these cases came out.
Back in 2020.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
There were a number of cases and it became a hot issue. And that was one of those where, again, same as your bill, it was a bipartisan agreement to change the bill so that everybody went back to the historical understanding of the Rule of Two. My view would probably be either let's go with the historical understanding, which is AbilityOne and Federal Prison Industries still get priority. Nobody is trying to dispute that.
Exactly.
Or same as the VA bill, current DX statute, as well as in the other SBA programs where they have explicit language, just carve out AbilityOne and Federal Prison Industries to ensure that we just stay the way that we've been. What I'm understanding you saying with the bill that you put forth is you're trying to keep in place the status quo, both before the FAR overhaul and as implemented the FAR overhaul. Okay, maybe we tried for task orders, but that was a no-go. And I can tell you why I think perhaps it's not as important now to do task orders than it was when I was at SBA. But if we're going to do status quo for contracts under the Rule of Two, then let's also do status quo for the interaction between AbilityOne, Federal Prison Industries, and small business preferences.
100%. This bill was never intended to do anything to touch mandatory sources. As you said, this bill is intended to put into statutes so that it cannot be changed when there's a sunset period for all the provisions in the FAR overhaul, right? It can't be changed. It's there. It's set in stone. And that's really what the goal has been here.
So that's an important point because you talked a lot about this during the FAR overhaul drafting period in 2025, and it'll probably come up again as we get into proposed and final in 2026. But there is that 10-year sunset period. Why is it that the rule of two would be, if it weren't for this statute, would be up for consideration in 2035 or 2036?
You can think about who wouldn't like this expansion, right? And there are a lot of powerful companies with a lot of lobby kind of able to go and influence and say, we don't really like this. I mean, there were organizations during the proposed rule with the FAR Council, again, that got rescinded, that stood up and said, we don't like this expansion. So there's nothing stopping a huge push to get rid of it. So that's why really this Congress, it's so crucial, this NDAA, because at the end of this year is the end of a Congress. And so then the bill would have to be reintroduced next year and start the whole process over again.
And you have momentum now because of the FAR overhaul making that decision and because of this unanimity around the statute.
100%. So I would encourage anyone listening, any organization you're a part of, talk to them about calling the Hill. You also, as a business owner, have a ton of autonomy here. You can actually make an impact. When you call a congressional office, whether it's the district office or the DC office, they have to record down what you're saying. So if you're calling and saying, hey, this bill is really important to me, and I want my member to know that it's important it moves forward. You don't even have to be as sappy enough to say in the National Defense Authorization Act, but I'd love if you did. That actually is something that makes it up to the member. They keep track of what people call, even from the district, they keep track of what people are talking about. So that is an impact that people can make. So I know I've put it out there before and encouraged organizations to talk to all of their members who have been supporting this. But I think it's going to take the entire community coming together and expressing to both the House and Senate how important this bill is and how important this foundation of small business contracting is.
That's a really good insight into how members view input from their constituents. It's more than just somebody picks up the phone and then says, okay, and slams it back down. They're actually recording all of these and chopping it up to see what the priorities are.
You may get a 22-year-old intern, but they are required to check it.
Yes. I'm sure the member hears that. And don't let this task order issue prevent you from making that phone call. I'll tell you why. I was very passionate about this when I was at SBA, but as I've been now out in the private sector for over a year, I've really seen the power of the GWAC and the multi-agency contract. We're talking about Leading Stars and Oasis Plus and Polaris. I worked with GSA and some of the other agencies on those when I was at SBA, and we came to an agreement to have set aside pools on those. And those pools are becoming prevalent.
By the way,
you remember when there was nothing for women-owned small businesses? There was no contracts, and now we have pools on Polaris, we have pools on Oasis Plus, particularly for women-owned and HubZone. That's been a big advancement for small businesses in every stripe.
100%. We tried to stand up during the first Trump administration at WOSB GWAC, but GSA just said, look, this is just too expensive. Same with HubZones tried to do that, and they actually did that back in the day, and it didn't work. So the pools piece is just incredible, in my opinion.
It's been a terrific innovation, and in a way that takes some of the pressure off of that task order issue, because the pools are task orders, and these are now, because of the ease of ordering, agencies are using these pools to get to the particular designations that they want. So it's not as necessary to use the rule of two at the order level because agencies can just set aside using the pools. So I think if I recalculated that $6 billion today, that probably would be a slightly lower number because of the pools, actually.
Okay. That's interesting data. You are the data king over here, so that's perfect.
Thank you for that. I'm trying to keep it up, so subscribe. We got to know each other by talking about size standards, speaking of numbers and data.
Oh my gosh, that is so that.
Yeah, going back to probably the last 5-year review 5 years ago to going through another 5-year review and talk about why that, for whatever reason, hasn't come out yet. One experience I remember very vividly at SBA is the debate over the IT value added reseller size standard and IT value-added resellers as a whole. It's a big segment of small business contracting that really, when you start out in government, you don't even necessarily realize exists.
And a lot of veteran-owned.
Yes, a lot of veteran-owned companies are these IT value-added resellers. Can you tell us what is the reason for having this special designation and size standard, and what's your interest in it? Where are you trying to go with it?
Yeah, we have worked with a trade association, the GovEvolve, for I think around year 8 or 9, which is a trade association just for ITVARs. We've worked on things like class waivers for the non-manufacturer rule, and size has always been something that's been a sticking point for them. I know there was an effort, this is prior to my time, around for moving a footnote, but basically the ITVARs operate under mainly a NAICS code that's 541-519 footnote 18, which is quite a mouthful, can I just say? And that
You gotta really geek out on size standards, what you're talking about.
pull me out of the weeds if I get too far in. I feel like I have worked on this now for so long since we met. And so the ITVARs are people and products. And if you think about it, actually, it's kind of like the construction industry faces their people and products. The elevator industry. I had a client in Michigan who had a revenue-based size standard. Well, think about the labor or the union workforce that he has, plus all of the materials that fluctuate in price. The margins of the contract versus size of the contract are very different. So the same thing with ITVARs. So they have a footnote that is an employee-based size standard. It's 150 people. So at 151 people, you are now supposed to directly compete with the largest multi-billion, multinational, global corporations. And I'm not going to name them all, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, just one person takes you over. You're either small or you're not.
Right. And I think there's been, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in this whole process of bringing this size standard piece to light that we've been working on through the past couple of years, I feel like there's been a notion at SBA of that's really large, right? Like seeing the numbers and the contracts and being like 20 million, that's a huge contract in the ITVAR space. There's been a misnomer because at the end of the day, the margins that the ITVARs make, because again, it's people, help desk, systems engineers, all the integration, and then the product that they get from the manufacturers, the margins you're operating on is super thin. So that's why they need an employee-based size standard. But again, 150, to say 151 you're supposed to compete with the big guys is, to me, kind of ridiculous, if I'm being honest.
Well, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure this is the case. That is the smallest employee-based size standard. All the other ones are 500, but you have ones that are up to 1,500. So 150 is much lower than it is in other industries.
Definitely. And when we dug into, to geek out on methodology, when we dug into this for our clients, one of the things we found is that there was 2017 census data, does that sound right, being used for the methodology. And if you think about the GovCon ecosystem, wow, have things changed since 2017. So that push for kind of a re-look at all size standards, frankly, is something that SBA is undertaking right now.
Yes, we're still awaiting new size standards, final rule, and proposed rule on the employee base. While that is happening, we had this intense period of GSA pushing as OneGov initiative through AI providers, and they announced Snowflake fairly recently. During that period, they sent surveys, first of all, about markups, the surveys to value-added resellers. They came out with some feedback or summaries of those surveys recently. And that seems like the criticism is not as intense as it was when this initially started, but there was a lot of talk about these value-added resellers really just be pass-throughs that are just marking up software, whatever it is for the federal government. What are the value-added resellers doing now in light of that pressure from last year and this outcome to adapt to the new marketplace?
So I'm going to back up on size standards really quick because I wanted to add a piece. The timeline is probably sometime soonish, summerish, fall. I think SBA realizes that they have to get something out. Businesses need certainty. Businesses need to know what they're going to bid on. But it's looking like they are going to do a lot of things that will help companies who are trying to transition into midsize, right? That cliff that everyone talks about. I think you're going to see a lot of changes in the rule that comes out in the proposed rule.
Sure.
And so I just wanted to add that. And the reason is, by the way, the new associate administrator, Ryan Lambert, was formerly on the House Small Business Committee, was a policy director for the majority, and he actually ran a hearing on size standards. And it was a full committee hearing where every single member that sat there and asked questions completely understood, and there were ITVARs who were testifying about why there kind of needs to be an entire relook of this process at SBA. That's where all of these roundtables came from during the pre-rule process. Office of Advocacy did some, the Office of Size Standards did some. So I would just implore them to continue that engagement. Okay, so now on to ITVARs. So there's been such a big emphasis on cost, right? And saying we want the best deal. So the FAST office at GSA has really been leading the charge on OneGov, right? And all these OneGov deals that you've seen come out in press releases. And unfortunately, ITVARs have been conflated with just resellers, meaning I'm reselling this thousands of these pens to the government, right?
In some cases, just drop ship it. All you're doing
Yes.
is entering something online.
100%. And ITVARs are rarely just doing licensing, right? That's almost always coming as like a package deal. So I use the example of the Army needs 1,000 computers, right? There's so many specialized things. Can think about it's CAC cards, right? Think about the CAC card piece. That's from one person. Then you're getting quotes from either Dell, HP, Apple, trying to figure out what's the best system to use with what already exists in the agency. What are the requirements that they want? Okay, you need certain licenses. You need certain cloud protection, cybersecurity, a help desk. I could keep going on and get out of breath. So all of those pieces are what ITVARs do. And I think where there's a misunderstanding with OneGov and the huge push to go direct is that the government is then taking out the people who are doing all the integration and trying to make them subcontractors. But if you think back to my cost piece, if you could just go direct to one OEM, right, one manufacturer, they're going to sell you their stuff. If you're just going to them, they're going to, of course, say, yes, this is the best product that you need, right? That's their job. If you don't have that competition that ITVARs provide, you're kind of taking out the price controls that they bring, right? And all the competition.
And they act as a filter to really get you the best value.
100%. And I think there's been also a huge push at DOD, DOW. By the way, I'm going to call it both because, yes, technically an act of Congress requires the name change, but at the same time, everyone's calling it DOW. So don't read into that, whoever's listening.
And it could be an act of Congress.
There absolutely could, 100%. But they have been pushing, kind of saying, okay, well, we want to do these enterprise-wide agreements with companies. And it's been pretty complicated. And as you said, because of the huge education push through GovEvolve, through our ITVAR Modernization Coalition, and through, I know, other companies and orgs that have been working on this, I think we've been able to kind of shift the conversation so that ITVARs are not looped in with just plain old resellers. I really wish it could be an industry.
It's a mouthful there, ITVAR.
It's a mouthful. It's confusing. But they really do provide value. And if, say, okay, the government only wants to go direct to one OEM, that OEM would have to stand up an entire division of doing exactly what the ITVARs do. If you don't think a publicly traded company is going to pass on those costs to the government, they absolutely would. They're not going to eat the cost to set up another division. And I've had some of them tell me it would be 30% more cost to the government if they had to do that.
But where do you see this going? Do you see ITVARs looking the ways that they do now in 5 years or so? Do you see them getting swallowed up by the OEMs in some sort of merger action? Do you see them getting some 500 employee size standard, becoming even larger than they are currently?
Well, I'm going to knock on some wood around the size standard. Our friends at the Pulse made a very compelling argument with their data poll around why that should be expanded. So I think that ITVARs, like any industry, have had to completely change their approach, right? With the big shifts in acquisition, there comes opportunity. So they're both trying to educate on what they do, but I think they've had to figure out how can we pivot? Are there different ways we need to approach our customers if they're looking for less deals but bigger deals, which has also, in my opinion, been a trend.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Let me go back to Capitol Hill. You've been working on a bill on the sole source authorities. Tell us what's happening there. What would happen with this bill?
I'm smirking because the Hill staff joked that's going to be on my tombstone to say raise the sole source thresholds. A bit of history.
Is that what you want?
Oh my gosh. No, I want this into law. A bit of history in this effort started back in 2019 to raise the sole source thresholds. And that's for individual 8A, hub zone, women-owned, OSDBU. It doesn't touch the entity owned, right? As everyone knows, they have their own rules and own piece of the 8A program. And we're not trying to touch that, right? Just everyone else. And all the companies that we represent said, no contracting officer is going to jump through hoops. Back then it was 4 million, right? And then 7 for manufacturing. Jump through hoops for a $4 million sole source, even if they wanted to do it. I had one woman-owned small business in Alaska who was just a WOSB say, they said to her, this is a $7 million opportunity. It totally makes sense with where you are and what your specialty is, but legally we can't do it. So there have been all these passive opportunities where then that work goes to a large business. So we sought out to increase them. There have been like 500 versions of this bill, just to set the record straight. The original bill was in the House to raise the thresholds for the 4 and 7 million to each year, because right now that's the total over the life of the contract.
Okay.
Then there was an effort bear with me on this one, in the reauthorization in the Senate Small Business Committee. They said, you know what? That's not enough money. When we look at the size of contracts, let's raise the thresholds to 8 million and 10 million and allow for that each year, right? So
Each year.
if I was doing math, what was that? This is why I'm the
50,
lobbyist,
40.
40 and 50 million. And that didn't go through only because the entire reauthorization effort fell apart over the regulatory title of the bill. And at the time, Chair Marco Rubio didn't want to move the contracting piece where this sat. And HR 190, which was the OG bill, the 4 and 7 each year, had passed the House already. Okay, so then there was an effort, because people have always asked me, like, where did this 8 and 10 million come from? That's where it came from. Because then the next Congress, there was an effort just to raise them to 8 and 10 million, which when we're lobbying for something and you're using data, we want to make a number make sense. So we don't just throw a size standard, oh, we think it's this, or, oh, we think this should be raised. At the bare minimum, we felt like this should be doubled.
Double the statutory.
Right. Double the statutory and make it tied to something with inflation adjustment, right? As that's going. Okay, so that didn't make it through because it was used as a negotiating piece during an NDAA for something else and another of the 4 corners wanted. That didn't make it through. So flash forward to now, we have a bill, HR 7154. That raises the sole source thresholds, again, for those 4 programs to 10 million across the board. Like, let's make it simple here. Why are there 2 separate lines? Let's just make it one, right? Sure. That was the Congress's idea. Sure. Is it as large as I want it to be? Absolutely not. But I'll take it because chipping away at, and I think making the statement that this is a tool that contracting officers can use when justified is really important. There's no threshold on the big company. They get multi-billion-dollar sole sources.
Yeah, that's an important point to make, that when we're talking about sole sources to small business, including the 80%, it's a tiny fraction the sole source contracts are getting awarded by the government annually. There's hundreds of billions of dollars of sole source contracts that are going out every year, and single digit percents, like 5% of them are to small businesses.
Right. So why not give this tool when we have business owners continually giving examples of how they're missing out, and it's instead just going to a large business, especially with this squeezed buying year, right? We all know that there's going to probably be a CR,
Sure.
while the House has worked on their appropriations bills. Yeah, it's easier to get it through the House because unlike the Senate, they don't have to be bipartisan. So if we go through the usual process where right around the holidays, all the members of Congress want to go home and they agree on some type of funding for the fiscal year, that then squeezes where all the money comes from. And contractors had to deal with that every year. So the government, especially, I believe, with the RIFs and the reorganization, that's going to become more important.
Sure, the fewer contracting officers, fewer competitions, it's part of all the competition. And then they have this compressed buying year because of the CR. We saw that the Army sent out a memo saying don't use sole source authority or AA sole source authority, particularly Air Force. That's something similar about not creating new contracts. Is this the right environment to be trying to raise sole source thresholds when there's this emphasis on competition?
Interestingly enough, it actually has been. We've really built it as a tool because it is. I know there was the effort by the chair and kind of the letters that were sent, and then SBA, this whole cascading effect on 8A. But to me, why are you limiting those companies from opportunity? If the industrial base keeps, and the shrinkage of the industrial base keeps getting quoted over and over and over again, then I thought this was the right time to do it. And it actually is an amendment in the House National Defense Authorization Act that's up for consideration. It was just submitted on Friday, and it's bipartisan. It's with Gil Cisneros, who is the ranking member of the House Small Business Committee Subcommittee on Contracting and Infrastructure, mouthful, and Derek Van Orden, who's a Republican from Wisconsin, who really glammed onto this issue. He's not on the Small Business Committee, but thought it was really important. So I think that sends a message.
Yeah, I could really budge the small business numbers, which we have not seen the latest SBA scorecard, but perhaps based on the preliminary numbers that I've seen, maybe for share a while where the numbers actually going down, sort of the industrial base numbers are doing to.
When does that usually come out?
Summer.
Okay.
So well, we're here 2 days before summer starts. In previous years, it has come out toward the end of the spring. But we're still waiting on FY25's report numbers. So what we're really waiting on are the goals for HSCs. We have to go almost in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year. Okay, HSCs on that, there are small businesses. If that comes through.
I know there was a lot of discussion around the goals, and I wonder if it's worth, and Congress has been thinking about reimagining the OSDBU or Office of Small Business Program, right? I think there was a bill at one point to change the names, right?
Yes.
But the OSBPs and the authority that they have, because Congress also recognizes that they don't have enough authority, right? Just focusing on the goals doesn't really move the needle as much as it should. So I think that's ripe for opportunity once those come out and once we see those numbers. And that data is invaluable to us just because it helps justify and move forward a lot of the policies that we're working on.
Oh, that's good to know. We actually read that.
Yes,
I think that's what I was working on at SBA. On the name change would be to take disadvantage out of OSDBU. The D in OSDBU stands for disadvantaged, and we're speaking on the Thursday after a Friday where SBA issued a proposed rule to change the definition of socially disadvantaged for the 8A program. The proposed rule has a quick turnaround period, 30-day comment period.
Don't you love the Friday drop?
Friday drop, and then 30 days that includes Juneteenth and July 4th. So 2 long weekends in it. July 13th, they're keeping with July 13th. Already, in just the first week, the agency has received about 20 comments, and there's some that are positive, probably more that are negative on the proposal. As companies are looking through this proposed rule and putting together their comments, what sort of advice would you give to them and then trying to formulate what their thoughts are on the SBA proposed rule on social disadvantage for the AA program?
I would say if you like it, tell them. If you don't like it, tell them. But tell them being SBA in a very purposeful way. What that means is, and you could speak to this better than I could, in those comments, go into the rule, find the pieces that you don't like. Tell SBA how it impacts your business, or the pieces that you do like and how it impacts your business. Because at least on our side, we feel like that is the most compelling piece that you can do as a company when you're responding to a proposed rule. Because I think people often misunderstand and think that SBA is just going to ignore comments. They have to respond to the comments, correct? In the final rule?
They have to respond to significant comments.
There to go. So significant, I'm assuming, would mean something more than just, I hate this or I love this, rah, rah, correct?
Yes, you tend to think of it as something that provides substantial input, data, helps, a different point of view on the comment or on the rule. The ones that are not significant are those that are off topic. Because people come in with comments on just about anything, but really they need to be on the topic at hand, which is social disadvantage for them. On the point with AA eligibility, you lead the women's procurement circle, and historically women have been able to use that social disadvantage criteria to gain access into the 8A program. What's your understanding of where SBA wants to go with AA eligibility, and what would be the path for women-owned businesses to get in for that program?
Yeah, we've assisted WOSBs over the years into getting into the 8A program. A lot of the ones that did successfully were ones who kept good records of that discrimination. So, for example, I have a quote because I've never forgotten this. One of the companies told me that their boss said, I'm going to promote this person because he has a family he has to support. You're single. You don't need this as badly as he does. So other examples have been denial of capital, right? Denial of a loan, which was really part of what drove that authorization of the WOSB program back in 2000, right? So I think I say for WOSBs, and again, you would know better than I do about this rule, but it seems like it will be harder for companies to get into the program. I would advise people maybe not to send their one stint in this program right now, right? Like while there's so much change and flux, if it were me, I would wait.
Yes.
But that's just my opinion.
I've been saying that with applications, certainly, because it doesn't seem, no matter which way SBA goes on this final rule, there's going to be some change. And during that period of change, SBA seems unlikely to process applications under an old standard.
Right.
So you might as well just wait to see how this all plays out and then decide whether you want to apply. Not legal advice, just practical advice of SBA is probably not going to keep to the way that it's been doing things for the past 3 years.
Right. And there's change. Look, there's change in all of the programs. And I think it's kind of been a wake-up call for everyone in this community, meaning the small business contracting community, just because something has been done some way for 20 years is not how it's going to be done right now. I mean, this is, again, also if we think about OneGov and consolidation, the FAR overhaul, the entire acquisition system has had a spotlight on all of us nerds that certainly wasn't on my bingo card, right? And so the other thing I'd say, and this is not to the rule, but also kind of within people's power, is tell Congress what you like about the change, or tell Congress what you don't like about the change. SBA has the authority to change this again, say another administration comes, it's a Democratic administration, they could change it, right? They have these authorities to highlight certain things. So Congress is the only place where you can get something into law of what you like or don't like, right? About these changes to the program.
And Congress is talking about the transportation bill, which has the DDB program in it.
Mhm.
Significant changes there. In your crystal ball or things that you're hearing in the halls of Congress, do you think there'll be any action on the AA program?
Meaning that there were two bills that proposed to eliminate it, right? And I think also eliminate WOSB. Was Hubzone in there? I can't remember. But basically to eliminate all the programs. This is nothing new. Back in the report, was it session? Now my brain isn't working. But back in a relook of the entire federal acquisition system, there is a proposal to eliminate all of the socioeconomic set asides for a 5% price preference. Do you remember that? Remember that, right? That commission that they did. And this is definitely where they got that from. Although I think this bill just eliminates them. It is not, in my opinion, in any member of Congress's interest to eliminate these programs because almost all of them have them in their district, have one company. Right. And that one company can call, like I talked about earlier, to their commerce person and talk about why this program is important to them and what it's done for them. Same with WOSB, same with Hubzone, same with SDDOSB. So I don't see a world where that's going to move forward. Even, people were asking, would the Republicans in the House move it because it's easier on their side? The Chair Williams has not done anything to eliminate the program. He's on that bill, right? And I think that just sends a message of that committee and the chair, they understand the importance of the small business programs. And then on the Senate side, I'm going to remind everyone, it takes 60 votes to get something through. So to get that through would require Democratic support, of which that would never happen. But also, again, Republicans also agree with the small business program. So I think it's just a fraction of Congress that thinks they should be eliminated.
Yes.
So I don't really see a threat.
Yeah, that's the eliminating discrimination in government contracting bill. That's the one that would eliminate women-owned small business and get rid of the concept of socially disadvantaged businesses. So that's a legislative tack. That's good that you don't see that getting much headway in either the House Business Committee or in the Senate.
I'll lay my body over the tracks if I think that that's going to be go anywhere.
We don't want that to happen. However, we also have seen news that SBA is initiating an audit of all economically disadvantaged small businesses. So there's certainly some level of scrutiny on women-owned small businesses generally. Just taking a step back, you mentioned the year 2000. Why do we have a women-owned small business program? What led to that program?
Yeah, to address the audit, by the way. So when I got sent that, because the Hill also was like, oh my gosh, what is this? I went through the survey to see what they were asking and then asked a bunch of our EDWOSBs within our Women's Procurement Circle, hey, did you get this? 1 and 2, is there any new information they're asking? There isn't any new information. It's not different than what you're asked when you are getting certified as an EDWOSB. And I talked to SBA and turns out that they had some very unfortunate timing putting this out because it's actually not tied to the 8A program audit. What they are doing is their normal 3-year EDWOSB audit. And every EDWOSB I talked to said that since they got in the program, they haven't been audited for EDWOSB.
Oh, it's their first time.
This is their first time. So SBA probably should clarify that when they did this. And I'd be interested in the comments if anyone has actually had this come up faster, right? Like if they got it last year and then got this letter. But that's my understanding when I went digging for what the survey was, right? But to your
good. So that at least alleviates the suspicion that SBA trying to hurt the program through this audit. It's really just something that they're required to do when they've gotten around to it in oddly timed circumstance, but there's not a
A PR
motivation in there to smell.
Right. And look, the women-owned companies in the program welcome audits and are really sick of, at least all of the ones I've talked to over the last 10 years, are really sick of the narrative of, oh, it's just a program where, their husbands actually run it, right? We've had a bill to eliminate self-certification in WOSB for the last couple Congresses that hasn't moved forward, and that had bipartisan support. So companies don't want that narrative that sometimes the SBA IG will push. They've suggested things to eliminate fraud in the program. So I think WSBs would welcome the fact to get rid of people who aren't legitimate, right? To really put a lid on that narrative. And when you look at fraud, honestly, in that program, I think the IG has found said 1%. But great, get rid of the 1%, exactly. When the program was authorized in 2000, the reason that it was so important was because there were so many women unable to get capital at that time, right? The examples that I gave. So women business owners really took up the fight to get this program into place. It took Anne from our firm. She led the charge here 11 years to get it into place. I believe another 2 years to get sole source authority. And then she also had to fight to remove dollar caps.
Yes, there used to be a cap on the competitions.
Correct. And this program is all founded on a NAICS study, of a disparity study of which NAICS codes where our WSVs are underrepresented, right? So it doesn't apply to every single one. It applies to a lot of them, not surprisingly. But I don't know of a program, and let's put what's going on with 8A in a box right now, the last year and a half. I don't know of a program that's been so scrutinized as WOSB since its inception. And I think it's that narrative of these are husbands with their wives running it. So any effort that Congress wants to do or the SBA wants to do to get rid of that and actually allow the legitimate WSBs to thrive would be very welcome. They've met the goal twice. The last time was 2015. And I think the data that I saw from Hugh shows that the numbers are actually going to go down for the first time in the history of the program.
It looks like it's going to go down from last year. It was 4.97 last year. It was really close to getting to that 5% goal. But it looks like it's going to be more of a gap between the goal and the issue.
And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole that you and I talked about with double counting, what that number would look like if it was just a set aside.
Thinking this, I think about the
you have
few
it.
years.
Oh man, I really harassed Sam about that when he was at SBA because of Congress. So I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I will say in this environment, WSBs, I think, have an opportunity, especially with the change in the FAR overhaul around not just once in a day, always in a day contract. So we've been telling WSBs to, okay, if there is that work, go educate contracting officers on how to use this program. We had to make a 1-pager on how to use the program because they're even pre-Doge and pre-RIF, there was just still a huge knowledge gap in the acquisition workforce. The WOSB even existed and how to use it, which is kind of crazy if you think about it was authorized in 2000. So it's really been an uphill battle with this program.
My thought on it was related to the NAICS study that you were mentioning. That is a level of complication that the other programs don't have, that you have to check the NAICS list, and the contractors don't necessarily know to check the NAICS list. That's not currently in their training to check the NAICS list. So it's a bit harder to use the program previously than it as compared to the other programs. But now, as we were talking about before with the pools, perhaps that makes it a bit easier because those have already gone through that NAICS process. So
definitely.
Things might be open up.
Well, and you can't get rid of it, right? If you got rid of that study, I feel like that would open it up to so much constitutional challenges, right? I do really wish, though, in this whole thing that we're talking about, that administrations would stop picking winners and losers. And I'm going to pick also on the Biden administration by raising that goal, right? That was saying, hey, this is a really important priority. Obama did it with something else. Trump 1 did it with another group. Trump 2 is doing it with another group. And I wish that there would be more of a focus of how can we make sure this base in all of these programs that all serve different purposes are getting access to competition in small versus large, instead of kind of doggy-dogging the programs alive and at each other. It just has been really exhausting, in my opinion, in the advocacy world, to be facing that.
Yes, it gives people something to talk about, though, because they say, oh, well, if it's not 8A anymore, now we're going to veteran-owned. Instead of being women-owned. You're talking about, I talked to a business owner who said, I'm being told to take 8A and women-owned off of my capability statement and just stick with small business. And what do you say to businesses like that? You keep it on for the next round of when women-owned will come back into vogue?
Every training I've ever seen from like an OSDBU, from a government contracting organization, always says lead with how you align with the mission and not with I'm this designation. Because there's a lot of back and forth around we need to find a unicorn of somebody who checks every single designation, right? I don't know. I see it as an opportunity, especially for WOSB, again, because of that change around the 8A contracts. I don't know if I'd remove it. I think I'd keep it.
Well,
I mean, I'm a woman-owned small business, so,
and
maybe
very big one.
maybe that's my perspective there.
You've done very well on that designation as a business. Just overall, when we were looking back in 2025 at the FAR overhaul, there were people who were saying, oh, it's going to get rid of the women program. It's going to get rid of the 8A program. It's going to get rid of the rule of 2. And thanks to your advocacy, we kept that in the FAR overhaul, and maybe it's statute now. But looking ahead at the political wins and what you're seeing in potential NDAAs, do you see the certification programs staying the way that they look now in 5-10 years?
No, I mean, I certainly know they're going to change, right? And SBA is going to look at under this administration, under the next administration, under the next administration, what they can do to align the programs with their priorities, right? That's just how it works. So I don't see them necessarily being the same, but I also don't see them being eliminated, again, to the point of it's not in anyone's political interest to completely eliminate them. Now, you can take them out of favor, right? And do things to try and influence the acquisition workforce of whether or not they're going to use them. But I had an attorney point out to me the fact that, contracting officer is going to do what's the quickest, right? They might be influenced by the politicals at their agencies, depending how loud they are, either way. But usually they're going to try, especially now with less people, to do whatever they can do to make it the fastest, right? So then the emphasis is, okay, how can you make small business faster, right? How can you create parity across the programs, across those rules, so that you don't have 400 different rules for each program, and to set aside for this is different than this, right? I think that's been a huge focus in Congress over the years, and I would hope continues as these programs are all shifting. I'm going to plead with the small business community, since you gave me a microphone, to really work together to get changes done that impact all of the programs instead of tearing each other apart. There was a change in goaling, right? Just for one program. There's a push for sole source increase just for one program. And what that does is it allows the opposition, that would be the bigger companies, right, and their lobby, to point to how fractured the small business community is. And the way that we've been able to move things forward over the last 23 years as this company has been because the heads of organizations working together to try and push a common goal. And I would really hope that that can continue and we can get back to that, because that's what makes effective advocacy in this community and in this very shifting environment.
That's a very powerful message. One team, one goal. We're pushing to get more small businesses in, as many contracts to them as we can.
Rising tide lifts all smalls. There you go.
All smalls. That's a great motto. We can use that for GovCon Intelligence. Lizzie Sullivan, how do people find you and hear more about Madison Services Group?
Website, madisonservicesgroup.com. My email is esullivan@madisonservicesgroup.com. We have a LinkedIn page like everyone in GovCon, which I don't know how everyone in GovCon spends so much time on LinkedIn, but we have one.
It's a good page.
You can get in contact with us there. We do a Reading Washington. That's kind of our take for the week on big issues. But we'd love to get in touch with companies, organizations. And I want to thank everyone who has advocated for rule of two, but also things right now that can make and strengthen the small business industrial base. It just is such a critical piece that needs to continue. So also wanted to thank anyone who's been doing that. And there have been a lot of players in this space.
Well, we want to thank you for your advocacy, being so visible and outspoken about the importance of small businesses in the federal contracting community. People don't realize how close it was to not having the preferences and advantages they have now. And you're a big part of being able to keep those going and looking at the environment the way that it is now as being a welcoming one to small business. So thank you for your role in that, and thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to end with my favorite thing to say is meet, call, write. Your members of Congress. That's when they're back in the district. Invite them to your office. You don't have to come to DC, although we'd love to see you, to go meet with them and their staff. It's getting engaged is something that is so critical for small business contractors writ large and for all of the programs to keep them going.
Meet, call, write. Great
Yes.
message.
Thanks so much for having me today.
I did.